according to Hume, then, absolutely no testimony in the history of humanity, any testimony of a miracle meets this criteria, right? He thinks there has never been a record of a miracle where there has been a sufficient number of witnesses that meet these requirements, right? They either didn't have a proper understanding, didn't have a sufficient scientific understanding, didn't have the correct motivations, right? Or intent, or were potentially tricked. Okay. So nothing for him is going to meet that criteria. Remember, I told you Swinburne thinks that's far too high a criteria, right? According to him, if you think that knowledge if you can only get knowledge from testimony based on this, then we can't know anything. So think about what knowledge you gain from testimony of others. Does it meet this criteria? If it doesn't, does that mean you should reject it? Right? That's very difficult. So one of the other things I think I mentioned that I really liked about Hume's account is this disease of the ears, right? So this goes again to his influence in psychology, why he thinks we like to hear these stories, right? So he thinks human nature is to greedily listen to and tell marvelous and extraordinary stories. And as a result, we have a tendency to believe in those stories. And he thinks that these tendencies actually override our inclination for rational judgment, right? Like, have you ever heard a story so cool and you're like, that's probably not true, but I just want to think it is, right? Like, I hope it's true. It would be so awesome if it was true, right? That's the sort of intuition or inclination he thinks we have towards truth, right? And towards stories. So he thinks also, though, what is really fascinating is that people who tend to believe in miracles also tend to be a little inconsistent about their willingness to believe in them, right? So what that means is that people who tend to believe in the miraculous are inclined to believe in the testimony purported by scripture, but are maybe less inclined to believe that such things are possible now. So he says that those who are inclined to believe in miracles almost treat the events of these miraculous stories as having occurred in a world that played by different rules than we know now, right? Like, so if you came to a Christian and said, I just saw someone part the Red Sea, they're not going to believe you, even though they think that this has happened before, right? Or that someone was capable of doing this, right? They're not going to believe that. Or if, right, someone came and said they were talking to God in a burning bush nowadays, right? I don't think most people, even if they're religious, would treat them as a prophet. They're probably going to want to put them in a padded room, right? Like, we just don't treat people's testimony of the miraculous all the time now as if it's as plausible as the miracles that occurred in biblical stories, right? And religious scripture. And so this other inconsistency, he thinks, like, why was it possible? Why were all these miracles like happening in scripture all the time and now we don't see any? Like, again, they needn't be repeatable, but it's not like we're seeing different types of miracles either, right? So why were miracles like so prevalent at some point? He thinks maybe it's just we're again inclined to this exaggeration. We're inclined to hyperbole. Maybe we're even inclined to lie a little bit, right? To fib here and there. Again, especially in terms of stories meaning to or being meant to express some sort of moral, right? So maybe the stories of miraculous events were merely just to teach us something about right and wrong. I mean, you guys know about like the German origins of our Disney fairy tales, right? Like, none of them had happy endings. They all ended with the children dying, right? Because they were all meant to scare children into doing safe things, right? And so we might think that maybe, right, Hume is sort of seeing the stories of the miraculous could possibly be viewed in the same way. All right. Unfortunately, Hume's racism comes in a little bit at the end here when he is talking about how none of the stories of the miraculous come from reliable people. He uses words like barbarous and ignorant, and he really means non-white people, which is really problematic. So that is definitely something to take into consideration. But again, you might think, what would be sufficient evidence to believe that a miracle had occurred even in the past, right? What would we need to know about the people who gave that testimony? Right, and so that leads us into J.L. Mackie, who's going to continue this question, right, about miracles and testimony. Okay, so again, how is it going to affect the confidence level that we give something, right? And so Hume ends the first part by allowing the possibility, again, that maybe something could meet that criteria. Maybe it just hasn't yet, right? But even though, again, he thinks if they're equally balanced, you should still probably lean towards, right, doubting that that thing has occurred based on your past experience. Okay, so Mackey then is going to say that it's not logically impossible that miracles ever happen, right? He's going to say maybe we just can't know. So he's switching gears, where Hume went saying, like, look, we can't prove that a law of nature has been violated. Let's just talk about whether or not it's justifiable to believe in it. Here, Mackey's saying, well, these things might be happening all the time, and our ability to be aware of them may not correlate, right, to the evidence that Hume is seeking. Okay, so just highlighting some potential approaches, right, to this problem. Remember, though, that this argument was never meant to give, again, deductive or definitive proof for God's existence. And that is because, again, arguments based on miracles rest on inference to the best explanation, right? So again, this is a type of inductive reasoning. It only ever says how likely something is to be true.